Hello, welcome to Cinema Savvy. We are back with our Peter Jackson retrospective. This has been, I think I mentioned this last week, this has been the weirdest kind of structure of any of our retrospectives we've done on the
Yeah.
channel so far. We did change the title, so now it is just the Peter Jackson retrospective. It was Peter Jackson month, which is when we started it, and it's gone over the course of like 3 months. And will probably be concluded this December, actually, when we talk about the Hobbit trilogy. We didn't want to go straight into that next week, so for all of you fans that have been enjoying the Peter Jackson retrospective, got to wait just like basically a year, and then we'll get to it, and then we'll finish it all off with the Hobbit trilogy. But that makes sense to tie it in with the 10-year anniversary of the first Hobbit film. So we're going to put a pin in it with this one. This is going to be sort of our last one for a while. And of course, we're talking about The Lovely Bones, which is the 2009 supernatural thriller film. I was going to say directed by Peter Jackson. It's Peter Jackson. It's the Peter Jackson retrospective. A lot of interesting things around this. We will be addressing the elephant in the room, which is quite a recent thing. I'm going to pass over to Tate for that. But before we do so, Tate, if you want to rattle through the socials.
Yeah, sure. So please make sure you leave a comment below with your thoughts on The Lovely Bones. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. We'd love to hear feedback from you guys always. So please just let us know about that. Also, on all of our other previous Peter Jackson films that we've reviewed, if you're wondering, I only really know Peter Jackson from either The Lovely Bones, what we're reviewing now, or Lord of the Rings films, and you want to watch any of his other films and have a look at our reviews of those, then please go back and do that. They will be in a playlist for you. Lovely, so you can watch
with
them
new
all
thumbnails, as you can probably see at the
with
beginning
new
of this
thumbnails,
video.
which we're going to bring up once again. That is a spectacular thumbnail. That is gorgeous with the signature and everything like that as well. Really lovely. And all the other videos will have those thumbnails with them as well. Be sure to follow us on all of our social media streams as well for any new videos coming out. So that is at Cinema Savvy on Twitter. Cinema Savvy, just type in Facebook, go onto letterboxd.com/Cinema Savvy, and go into the description below and pick up a t-shirt or a comfy jumper from TeePublic.
Absolutely. I need to get my t-shirt out again. It's been a while since I've worn the Cinema Savvy t-shirt, and it is honestly the comfiest t-shirt that I own. That's not a sales that is not a sales thing. Believe me, it is genuinely the comfiest shirt that I own.
Yeah.
Right. The Lovely Bones. We're not going to dive into the film straight away because there have been sort of recent developments pertaining to the author who wrote the Lovely Bones book.
This is who I get passed on to.
Yeah, so, I believe it's Alice Sebold, isn't it? Who was the author?
Sebold. I'm not sure how to pronounce her name. She wrote a book in 1999 called Lucky. This was based off of her own experiences of being raped. Never a nice experience in the first place, but she wrote a book about it, and she got very, very popular off that book. Allowed her to continue writing books such as The Lovely Bones. Lucky was the book that brought her success in the first place. The drama behind this, however, is that as of November last year, so very, very recently, kind of developments made within the last few months, the person who she accused of raping her was exonerated and proven like overall not guilty. Anthony Broadwater had served 16 years in prison at this point, had been on the sex offenders register for 23 years on top of that, which is a very, very long time to lose that element of your life and to kind of be kind of put in prison and just to be kind of almost kind of exiled from society within that time. He pleaded his innocence the entire time. Now, the drama behind this comes with the fact that someone trying to make a film adaptation of Lucky saw massive holes in the original case being made. For example, Miss Sebold pointing him out on the street, saying that he was the one who did it, alerting the police. When they brought Anthony Broadwater in front of her in a lineup, she could not, she didn't pick him, basically. She didn't pick the same person who she'd accused on the street. And then when in court, because Mr. Broadwater was taken to court in the end, which is another thing that helped with the exoneration of him in the end, because it was just kind of like, how on earth did he get brought into the court when he wasn't even picked from a lineup? She pointed at him in court and said, yep, that's the man. So she didn't even know who she was accusing at the time. This is just a horrible situation overall. We do have to address it because she is the person who wrote the Lovely Bones book. She wouldn't have been able to write the Lovely Bones book if it wasn't for Lucky, and it's
similar subject matter as well.
it is a similar subject matter. Kind of remove kind of rape for full-on murder, which is what's done in this film, and that's what you end up with. It's a very difficult subject to talk about because she went through a horrible experience of being raped. It's absolutely awful, but also she put someone else through a horrible experience as well by accusing him of a crime that he did not commit. And he served his time, 16 years served, and 23 years with a sex offenders register record as well. So not able to obtain jobs after his kind of release from prison. He's chosen to forgive her, but it is worth noting that like it's a controversial thing, and there is no Lucky film being made. The book has actually been taken off of the shelves completely. This book was written in 1999. It's kind of been barred from society, this book, because it's now kind of shown to have inconsistencies.
Well, she's already made a money from it anyway, hasn't she? So
she's not only made kind of the profit from it, but she's also made her career from it as well, which I think is what people are not happy about. Obviously, Peter Jackson at the time of making this film and all the people involved at the time of making this film had no idea that this was the case.
Yeah.
But we did have to address it as kind of where the source material came from with the film and stuff like that. And I guess now hopefully we can talk about The Lovely Bones itself.
I got pretty irate before we hit record on this. Injustice is just something that really is like one of my biggest pet peeves in the world. I mean, it's always going to be it's a tale as old as time, isn't it? Really. You know, there are other factors at play as well. You know, judicial system and racial discrimination, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I've said some very colourful things to say the least before we hit record, so I'm not going to bring it up on this video because this is a film review. We're reviewing Peter Jackson's The Lovely Bones. Yeah, I'm just going to leave it at that. But
okay, let's go on with the film,
because
this was the first time seeing this film myself. I believe you'd seen this beforehand, hadn't you? Or
I'd seen it once, yes. So I think I watched this on TV. This was probably one of the, I won't say it's one of the last Peter Jackson films that I watched because there was a number that we started this retrospective off. But certainly his modern ones, you know, Lord of the Rings I'd watched and King Kong, and I think for the longest time that was kind of it, you know, that in terms of his modern films and you know, like The Hobbit and everything. I believe I saw this film even after all of those as well. So it was sort of like the last of his modern era, I would say, which was sort of springboarded with The Lord of the Rings. And I think it was on TV one night and I thought, well, I haven't watched it. I'm a fan of Peter Jackson. The film didn't kind of jump out to me. I remember like trailers coming out for this thing and everything, but the name Peter Jackson on there, it just looked so well, and it is so small a scale from what we come to expect from Peter Jackson. And there is that expectation there. I mentioned that last week with King Kong, how, you know, with Lord of the Rings, he'd made 3-hour epics that, you know, sweep all the awards. King Kong, well, of course it's got to be 3 hours because he just made, you know, that's kind of his new shtick now. And it's this big CGI 3-hour epic, 3-hour plus epic. Yeah. And then you go to The Lovely Bones and it's this really small scale, you know, thriller drama film, almost harkening back to the likes of Heavenly Creatures. Now that we've, you know, I'd say out of all of his films, that is probably the one that it's closest to thematically and visually, certainly in some parts, I think.
Whilst I was watching this film, I was thinking, after having watched all of his films now and have kind of a kind of overall view of his entire filmography, I'd put it somewhere between Heavenly Creatures and The Frighteners. It's got The Frighteners kind of afterlife, kind of interacting with the dead, kind of very, very small niche it pulls into. But it also has the tone and kind of the not really sense of wonder, but the kind of dreamscape kind ofness of Heavenly Creatures. So it's somewhere blends in between the two, which makes for a really interesting film. It's an odd one. I enjoyed watching it, but not in kind of a way because it's not a nice film to watch. It's not one where you can go, oh my God, that was such a wonderful film. It's one where you go, wow, that was a good film. I didn't like the subject matter, but it was a good film. So it's very well done in that way. It's once again unusual to say it's a Peter Jackson film because there are some Peter Jacksonisms in there, especially stuff with Handycam, Steadicam, GoPro. I don't even know what you would even consider it, which does get carried over into the Hobbit, which I noticed, and I was like, oh, so that's where he got it from. I was wondering where he got the idea to
Is
do
that
that.
the bit with Stanley Tucci running into the camera and the camera's like directly in his face? Yeah, very strange. I think it works better in this film than it does The Hobbit.
Oh, 100%,
Certainly. And you know, Peter Jackson reuniting with a lot of familiar faces with this in terms of, you know, the crew that he works with. You know, Fran Walsh, Philippa Boynes once again writing the screenplay with him, Andrew Lesnie as cinematographer. And actually a different editor for this one. So Jabez Olson, who also edits the Hobbit films as well, and I'm guessing is kind of his new go-to full-time editor now. I know that he's also he's edited, the 2 documentaries as well, They Shall Not Grow Old and the new Beatles documentary that came out. I think he was an assistant editor on The Lord of the Rings and King Kong, and then, you know, got given the gig with this one. So a lot of familiar faces he's surrounded himself, and again a joint US and New Zealand venture in terms of studios behind it.
There were a couple. I was just going to say there were a couple of things that actually caught me out in this film. First of all, the cast, because I didn't even see the cast going into this. I knew that people had always referred to, oh, Saoirse Ronan, she's the girl from The Lovely Bones, and I'm like, people keep on saying that, but I know her as the girl from Atonement or the girl from Brooklyn or just other films and stuff like that, because I feel like she's managed to carve her way out a career now with 4 Oscar nominations for either Best Supporting Actress or Best Actress. At this point, like, The Lovely Bones wasn't even one where she got nominated for that kind of category. So I feel like she's elevated herself past just being called the girl from The Lovely Bones by some people. Apart from her, I was surprised to see Mark Wahlberg there. I was surprised to see Rachel Weisz, Susan Sarandon, Stanley Tucci. I knew was in the film, but it was one of those things where it was like, he really looks like Ryan Gosling, like from some of the creepy films that he's done. And I was like, I swear that's Ryan Gosling. And then I was reminded, oh, no, it is Stanley Tucci. Oh, so that's the character he's playing. It looks nothing like Stanley Tucci. It's a completely transformed performance. And I believe he got nominated for the Oscar in that one as well.
He did, yeah. Best Supporting Actor, yeah.
Yeah, even characters like the sister, Rose McIver, who I know from iZombie and like other TV shows that she's done in America since then. It had such a good cast. I was very kind of shocked by that. Like, it was something that kind of caught me off guard. I wasn't really expecting it. The second thing that caught me off guard was that it's a period piece. I was expecting it to be like set in kind of modern day, kind of like late 2000s kind of vibe, but it was welcome to, was it the 70s? Like,
yeah, 73 I think it is, or early 70s, early to mid 70s. Yeah,
that completely caught me off guard. I thought it was going to be a lot more modern. So yeah,
there's a lot I didn't remember about this movie as well. You mentioned the cast there, sort of watching it earlier today. I forgot that Mark Wahlberg was in the film. I forgot that Rachel Weisz was in the film. I forgot that Susan Sarandon was in the film. This is, and I think for a lot of people that have reviewed the film as well, certainly at the time when it came out, it really is just like the Saoirse Ronan and Stanley Tucci show. Very much so. You know, they are kind of like the focal characters of the film, I would say. I think, you know, for a 12A certificate, it was very important for Peter Jackson. He wanted to make sure that it pushed for a 12A certificate because he wanted this film to be seen by the widest audience possible, which is, you know, absolutely fair play to him. It is quite a very much a grim film, but I think it could also be, you know, a cautionary film maybe for some younger viewers as well. Yeah, and I like the themes that this film deals with, and as you mentioned, I didn't even think about the Frighteners, but I think that's a fantastic you know, comparison there about, you know, coming back from the afterlife and sort of watching over not just the killer and trying to get some kind of revenge or retribution for what happened, but also the aftermath of the family. And there have been a few films that I've watched that have dealt with sort of afterlife things, you know, the Frighteners being one of them. But the one I was reminded of was it called A Ghost Story that we watched and reviewed?
Yeah, David Lowery's Ghost Story. Yeah.
Similar films like that where they do kind of have a very morbid and stark tone to it. I think maybe A Ghost Story has a more consistent tone. This film seems to flip-flop. This one seems to go from light-hearted kind of family shtick to some of the most intense scenes I've ever seen in a film. Do you think it struck a good balance, that this film, The Lovely Bones, between the two tones, or do you think it kind of got in the way of its storytelling a little bit?
You do get a lot of tonal whiplash in the film, and I was trying to wrap my head around it myself, and actually, I got the person I was watching it with. They explained it as kind of, because they love the film. I want to point out, so it was. I did have a little biased opinion next to me and stuff like that, but they were saying like, look, here's the thing, you have to remember that the main character Saoirse Ronan is meant to be playing a 13, 14-year-old. And a lot of the stuff where I got tonal whiplash from the film, such as the dreamscape and the kind of character that you meet there, and kind of their kind of rendition of the afterlife and what eventually happens towards the end of the film. Are we allowed to go into spoilers here?
Yeah,
I guess
of
people
course.
are
Yeah,
watching
it's
this.
been
So
out
yeah,
since
it's been out
2009.
since
If you haven't seen it, watch
guys.
it.
It's been out a decade. I can spoil it. Her choice in the end not to kind of reveal that her body's being buried, but instead kind of choosing to kind of have that kiss that she's been wanting so much. I thought, I don't like that to start off with. But the person I was watching with was saying, like, you have to remember, she's a 14-year-old girl. The most important thing for her is that's the kind of thing that she's been kind of wanting the entire film, to kind of live that normal life, and that's the last chance she'll get at it. And even on the IMDb page here, it says like she must weigh up her desire for vengeance against her desire for her family to heal. And that's kind of the balance that you get in this film, and it does cause a lot of whiplash because it's weighing between those very stark decisions. Do you want your family to kind of get over your death, get on with their life, grow up, grow old and stuff like that, and kind of have you as a lovely memory? Or do you want like the full-on vengeance, dragged through trial, kind of prolonged pain, and you yourself not get the chance to actually kind of heal yourself? So it's a really interesting kind of dynamic and balance. I feel like the film could have done better in conveying that, because instead of kind of actually going with the whole kind of thought process that you would have to come up with yourself, they kind of just show it and just go, here, look, it's light and fluffy and happy, and oh no, it's back in reality, it's dark and it's evil. I feel like there could have been a lot better kind of subtle moments within there that they could have explained it all a lot better, and kind of have that dynamic between the two main characters, the murderer and the murdered, kind of play off just a better kind of showing of that.
That scene you mentioned there towards the end, where she gets her first kiss essentially at the very end. I mean, it's sweet on paper, sure, certainly.
Personally, I wasn't a fan of it. Personally, even with the explanation,
I think it gets complicated. I'm all for a kind of being stuck in this, not in heaven, not in hell, this limbo state, as an observer looking in at the world around her in this kind of weird ghostly vision. And she has her sense of
just like in a ghost story, like
yeah, exactly. I think that's a very good comparison. I really need to watch that film again. It was
such
so
a good film.
It stayed with me. I remembered it still.
It
stayed with me. And that 10-minute pie eating scene that goes on for ages. But I think when she can transcend and almost return, like Casper the Friendly Ghost, for one day only kind of thing, just to get her kiss, actually very similar to Casper now I think about it. That's where it kind of gets muddy for me. I'm not going to. I know it's not a fully realistic film, obviously, although some people might argue that it is. If that's your belief, but. It's when. How does that work? Like, because it's the friend, right? It's the one who's kind of. She's in tune with the afterlife, and she gets a sense of a presence there. Yeah, is it like Blade Runner 2049, like the synchronization scene where she does actually become Saoirse Ronan in the face, or is he actually kissing the friend, but he's got a sense that she's been possessed by Saoirse Ronan? That's where I lose it.
It's another thing. I can suspend belief to say that any interpretation of the afterlife is allowed, because we have no idea what the afterlife holds. It could hold something, it could hold nothing. I'm completely okay with it being a weird magical dreamscape where you either have to live out kind of your kind of current life, overview the life of others and stuff like that. I'm completely okay with that side of things, because that's all kind of like, we don't know what happens after. You can fill the blank here. What I'm not kind of okay with is the idea that someone within this universe can speak to the dead and interact on behalf of the dead. And I think that's where it kind of sways a bit more towards the Frighteners in the kind of like Peter Jackson kind of film set, because it's something that on paper, if you wrote down, oh yeah, and there's one person who interacts with her after she's died and ends up like having her body taken over and her having her first kiss, you see that on paper, you go, That sounds really cheesy and doesn't fit the theme of the film entirely. And they managed to, I guess, slightly get away with it because it is kind of a nice moment. The music in the scene is fantastic, but that might be because I love that piece of music, the big ship, because that was in Me and Earl and the Dying Girl, which was one of my favorite films. Like, but at the same time, the music's really the only thing that's doing it for me in that scene. I feel like it would have been, I don't know what they could have done to make it more impactful towards the end of her, maybe finally letting go and seeing kind of her body being buried and her family finally moving on. I don't know if it would have been bad if he was arrested, like him getting away and dying in what can only be described as the most on-screen, off-screen death I've ever seen.
It's almost like divine intervention, isn't it? You see the glow on the icicle. They do set it up though earlier, which obviously
they
I
set
didn't.
it up, but it's like he dies because he gets hit by an icicle and then decides to stagger back 4 or 5 paces and fall off a cliff. It's like, really, that's how he goes.
Which has actually been
satisfying.
Which is, I mean, that was an attempt to make it more satisfying. So I've never read the book, but with test screenings, the audience wanted more of a gruesome death for Stanley Tucci's character, because I believe in the book it is literally just an icicle hits him and he dies. I don't know whether it goes in his head or his back or whatever. Peter Jackson went back and extended the death sequence and made it a bit more gruesome with him seeing him hit all the rocks on the way down, breaking his neck and everything.
At this point, and this is what I was saying throughout the film whilst watching it, it's not a fault of Peter Jackson because he's adapting it. It's a fault of kind of the original material in that case. And it's kind of having an ending which is unsatisfying, and trying to make it satisfying is very difficult whilst trying to keep it as close to the book as possible. So that's not on the fault of Peter Jackson, because if that's the case and the original ending was just him getting hit by an icicle, him getting hit by an icicle and falling off a cliff is more satisfying. So
another scene that kind of I might go easier on this scene, but it's the realization moment where Saoirse Ronan's, Mark Wahlberg's character in the film, he has that realization that he believes that Stanley Tucci is the one who murdered his daughter. And I know that he's kind of going off the rails a little bit, is a little bit mentally unstable, as any father would be in that situation. And he's looking to point the finger. He's accusing everyone and their mom essentially in the street. But there's no realization, like there's no moment where Saoirse Ronan characters like talking to him from the afterlife, whispering in his ear, saying that it's him. It shows you clips where they just greeted him at one point.
The only realization is that he's looking at the flower and the flower changes, but that's the flower changing for him. That's not the flower changing just in real life. It's weird. It's like a weird drug sequence where he sees something different to what everyone else sees. I feel like it would have been much better because they'd set up the idea of the dollhouse in the film all the way throughout the film, the kind of control that he has over the dollhouse. I was hoping that like the little kind of bracelet doll thing that he kept as a trophy would be the thing that kind of made it like, oh, that's the thing. Like just something like that. Maybe something he hangs up in his car or something like that. And he just sees it amongst a bunch. And you could have done it with the reveal with one of my favorite scenes in the film, actually. The scene where they kind of go through all the victims when she's in the house.
Yes.
It could have been that all of them kind of have lost something. And that was the things that he was hanging up in the car. Just something like that, something as subtle as that, because that's something that someone who's going crazy would obsess over instead of just like, oh, I'm seeing a visualization of like a flower and stuff like that. I think the biggest, as much as I enjoy kind of someone looking over and being like a guardian angel and stuff like that, the biggest thing that I have with this film, which I'm not too sure on, is that interaction between the afterlife and the kind of living. Every time it's used, it seems almost kind of cheesy and not realistic and grounded, whereas you could have had a very realistic, grounded film with those magical elements of her just kind of looking in, with like the whole kind of almost like her banging on the glass, kind of going, he's the murderer, and because she's already dead, no one responds, that kind of overlooking angel type thing. But it is what it is. It was an enjoyable film filled with enjoyable performances. I think Stanley Tucci is clearly the standout, and Saoirse Ronan was fantastic for her role. Some of the other roles as well.
Just really quickly, sorry, you mentioned there about the afterlife stuff not feeling grounded. Interestingly enough, Peter Jackson described the book as, quote, a wonderfully emotional and powerful story. Like all the best fantasy, it has a solid grounding in the real world. And I think what it is, I mean, the visuals have been praised in this film, and I guess as CGI goes, it's fine.
It's pretty good. Yeah.
But it does look quite not fakey fake. Of course, it's fake, but
it looks very Heavenly Creatures.
Looks very artificial. I will say that, incredibly artificial, and it's probably better than Heavenly Creatures, but Heavenly Creatures had a point to it being weird and kind of uncomfortable, and you had those weird clay creatures and castles that they were creating in their mind. Whereas this one, you have moments where they're dancing on top of a turntable, dancing on top of a vinyl player with the records when they're partying, and it's all very strange. I do like how the weather changes. I do like when she's in a happy, good mood. You've got leaves sort of like drifting off a tree, and then the leaves are almost birds flying away. That's some really nice stuff. When she gets agitated or angry or scared, it all goes stormy, and she's in the middle of an ocean. So I guess the visuals can be praised. I mean, it's wetter, of course. The visuals are going to be good for the most part. Sometimes they do kind of drop the ball, but yeah, I don't know. I think it's just because it looks so digital. It just looks so fakey. I don't know. You can tell they're on a green screen, for example.
Is that exaggerated? I wonder, is that exaggerated by the fact that it is a period piece and it does look so much like the 70s?
See, I don't think it does. I think it lacks the film grain. I think it lacks the authentic quality of the 70s.
Yeah.
Like when I watch Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, for example, like the late 60s.
Yeah.
That immerses you in that world. And yes, it does have Tarantino's flair to it, with the ending, certainly, and aspects of the film during sort of like the more violent moments. But that feels grounded in that time for me. Whereas this, again, if it was shot on film with the grain in there, maybe. Yeah. But the ridiculous wig or haircut that Mark Wahlberg's got, it doesn't feel authentic to me in terms of a period piece. Maybe that's just me. It looks all fake. It all looks glossy and with a sheen over it. And I don't like, kind of like Stranger Things doing the 80s. Yeah. It doesn't feel authentic 80s, It feels made for TV
modern 80s almost, in that same sense.
But you mentioned performance there, Stanley. We would be remiss if we didn't talk about Stanley Tucci in this whole review. So deservedly, getting nominated for best supporting actor in this film.
Transformed performance
is incredible, and he has been the thing. When I watched it the first time years and years ago now, he has been the thing that stuck with me the most. I think in subsequent reviews, when I've talked about this film to you, I've said standout performance from Stanley Tucci, a couple of scenes of real tension, the rest is kind of forgettable to me, and I actually kind of stand by that review of it. I don't think it's a bad film by any stretch of the imagination, but holy shit, Stanley Tucci disappears into this role. The makeup and everything, it doesn't even look like the same person, and a few scenes in this film are probably some of the most tension filmed I've ever seen in cinema. Really well done. And that's, I think, where Peter Jackson excels with this. It's the editing as well. The editing's very clever. The sound, or the lack of sound, really adds to that tension and isolation. And, your heart is kind of pounding along with Saoirse Ronan's character in that situation. It's a fucking horrible situation. And you're dying for it to get out. And that she probably isn't. Well, if you know anything about the plot, that she isn't. But you're almost, because it's so confined and claustrophobic and everything, it almost puts you in that situation as well. And I was watching this thinking, if I was in that situation, like, how would I get out? Like, you are utterly, completely powerless in this situation. So that scene, certainly, with where he's built the bunker in the cornfield, is probably one of the best scenes in the film, because it's terrifying and it's filled with tension and just greatly constructed by Peter Jackson there in his direction. And the other one
in the house, I'd say,
is in the house. There's another good bit actually where the police come to investigate and ask Stanley Tucci questions, and he realizes he's kept the bracelet, and he's like, shit, I've got to get to that bracelet. And it's a really creepy moment actually where
he's looking through the dollhouses.
Yeah, and he's like watching him through every, like, try and play it a little bit more subtle. If you're trying to disguise the fact that you've committed this horrible atrocity, don't act like a complete weirdo all the time. And he does act like a complete weirdo. But yeah, the other bit is where Saoirse Ronan's sister breaks into the house. She suspects Stanley Tucci's character. She goes into she's in the
upstairs bedroom. Yeah.
And you know, she finds the evidence hidden away in a floorboard, and again the editing, the shots, the extreme close-ups of that board, and she's trying to lower it back in without making any noise, and then it just makes it's so great.
And then
Some
she's
great tension
sprinting out
there.
the window as fast as possible, and he's coming up the stairs. It's
It's like a
so
horror
good.
film. It's like a
It is
slasher
like a
film.
horror film.
Yeah,
it's fantastically done, and just the subtleness of Tucci's character, just kind of walking down the stairs, seeing the broken glass, and then slowly turning and walking back up without making a sound.
he is animalistic, isn't he? Like the way he carries himself, like he cocks his ear up almost to like hear what's going
I
on.
mean,
Is
honestly, he
predatory.
could have. If here's the thing, if she was quiet and tried to get out, he would have slowly crept up the stairs and he would have got to her. It's the fact that she made a noise that kind of prompted him to go, look, she's going to run, I'm going to run. And it's just the moment where she's on the ground as well, where I'm like, oh no, she's broken her back or something. Like, oh no, she's landed. And there's like, no, she gets back up and she starts running. It's so kind of, that sequence is so good. But there are a lot of things in this film which are really, really well done, really well thought out and stuff like that. I know we have been kind of egging on it a little bit, but I did actually enjoy the film more than some of like Peter Jackson's other films. I guess Chris will probably have to do a ranking of them.
Yes, we will.
Once we get through the Hobbit films, and do maybe like a top 3 or even a top 5 of them.
Or even if we just do, I mean, we could do that. We'll work it out. We'll figure it out. I'm sure we'll be able to do something. The question is, will we have to watch the Beatles documentary before that point? We've got a year. We've got a year to watch it, and that's probably how
Chris,
long it will
take. If we're
take
watching
to
the
get
Beatles
through
documentary, then I'm willing to throw in "They Shall Not Grow Old" into the mix because I absolutely
Well,
adore that film.
I think we have to. I think we have. If you're going to do a ranking, I think we absolutely have to throw those in. Really quickly before we end the review, I did want to talk about the music. So, Brian Eno or Eno, I'm not really sure how to pronounce it. It's a British musician. He did the music for this film. I think it was either Fran Walsh or Philippa Boynes who was a fan of his and recommended he do the music. I think Peter Jackson asked him to turn in 2 demos just to see what kind of stuff he was producing, and he actually requested, can I produce the score for the whole film, which was quite strange because I think he'd mentioned that he wasn't a fan of doing film soundtracks, or he didn't want to do film soundtracks.
Yeah.
And the song that you hear in the credits is an original actually by the composer from a demo that he produced in the 70s and was left unfinished. And he managed to get in contact with the original singer he was working on it with and finish the song, which is the one that you hear in the end credits. So I thought that was pretty cool. A project spanning over decades, and it was finally finished. And the song that you mentioned, I think it was the one you mentioned where she goes into the afterlife. Song to the Siren by This Mortal Coil, which, a great band name right there, ties right in with the film. It is a song that has kind of been ruined for me, though, with the cover version that's in Zack Snyder's Justice League. It plays when the Flash is running in slow motion to save Iris, and there's all the CGI hot dogs in slow motion. And it's all very strange, and I don't know why that song's playing during that scene. So final thoughts on The Lovely Bones. It is kind of what my review was many years ago when I watched it on TV for the first time. I think there are some fantastic moments of tension in there. Powerhouse performance by Stanley Tucci. Saoirse Ronan's great in the film as well. I like some of the themes it delves into. I think it could have gone a little bit deeper into them, in all honesty. I think Peter Jackson wanted it to be a 12A. That was his vision. I'm not taking that away from him. I actually think as a film, it is quite ballsy with the stuff that it is able to get away with for a 12A. There's a lot of grisly imagery in this film, especially in that sort of montage where she sees all the previous victims, Stanley Tucci's sort of like serial killer habits in the past. And also the scene with him in the bathtub after he's committed the rape/murder as well.
Yeah,
and it's the muddy water in the bath and all the items on the floor. It's really grisly. So that stuff works in the film and is very impactful. And I think for what Peter Jackson was setting out to achieve with the film and adapting the book, I've never read the book, but apparently it is very close. I think he did an excellent job. But it is a film that it's almost like a one and done for me. There's nothing particularly anything about it that will bring me back to watch it again or rush back to watch it again. Maybe that could be to do with the heavy material that it's dealing with. But I think it is quite fairy tale like and surface level with a lot of its themes. And I do think it could have gone a lot deeper, like a ghost story. I think that definitely does hit the beats of what it is like to be cast adrift as this spirit watching everything go by. Time just kind of becomes this unending conveyor belt almost that you're watching. You know, people have been around for hundreds and hundreds of years watching these things happen. So I think that the tone of that was a lot more somber, and I don't know if a more somber tone of this film would have worked. There is a pang of sort of bittersweet ending to it where you do get that fairy tale kiss almost at the end, and that's where it loses me. It goes a little bit too, you know, teen fiction, like, oh, she got the guy at the end kind of thing. And that's not really what I think the point of the film should have been. When it was the family moving on and dealing with things, I think that was right. Now I'm thinking about it. If she did actually come back and it was her face that, you know, her school crush could see, why didn't she come back? If she has that power, why didn't she appear before her parents? Is she like Patrick Swayze from Ghost, where she can show up at the end and, you know, people can see her?
Just for pottery.
Just for pottery. So I don't know. I enjoy the film, but it's, you know, it's not in my top 10. It's not in my top 100. It's probably not in my top 200. It's a well-crafted movie, and I do think it is quite, in terms of the, I don't know, I was going to say it's quite unlike anything Peter Jackson's ever made, but as we mentioned at the beginning, it's got elements of the Frighteners in there. It's got elements of Heavenly Creatures in there. It's a unique film, I would say, in his filmography for sure.
Yeah. I would go back to this film just to see the performances of Saoirse Ronan and Stanley Tucci again. I think they merited that with their performances, but it would be a while before I went back.
Yeah.
And it's funny that we've mentioned A Ghost Story so much in this review, because here's the big qualm I have with this film. A Ghost Story stuck with me more. And A Ghost Story, I believe, told a better retelling of kind of similar events. And if I was chosen between these two films, I would immediately pick A Ghost Story, like straight away, even though the films are quite similar. Doesn't take away from the fact that this film, I did quite enjoy it. It does have some negatives towards it and stuff like that, which we discussed today. But like, it's, as far as Peter Jackson films are concerned, it's better than some of his earlier ones. It's well crafted. It's well done. Some of the visual effects are very nice. The tension is fantastic. I really want him to do a thriller horror in that kind of style of like creeping around the house and stuff like that. That would be fantastic. But you would need someone like an actor like Stanley Tucci who can do that, to be able to do that. But yeah, no, overall it was good, but it does have some flaws.
We talk about Peter Jacksonisms as well. Was I the only, when Stanley Tucci falls off the cliff at the end, was I the only one who was reminded of Bad Taste, his first film, when Peter Jackson's character falls off that cliff? Well, like, is Stanley Tucci going to tie a belt around his head to keep his brain in and like carry on?
Well, Peter Jackson's cameo in this film was he was just a random background person in the shop.
Oh, was I was going to say mall. I missed his cameo in this one.
Random background person this time, not a big kind of, you know, role.
Well, his ones in the first two Hobbit films are very noticeable. So if we get to those next year, then I'm sure you'll see them. Or if you go back to them, yeah. So I guess that kind of, well, it doesn't conclude our Peter Jackson retrospective, but you know, it's on hiatus for the best part of a year as of right now. So you know, passing over to you guys, let us know what you think of The Lovely Bones. I don't know if it's a popular film. Like, I don't know if a lot of people have probably, like me, watched Lord of the Rings, watched King Kong, and kind of stopped there. But if you have seen The Lovely Bones, let us know what you think of it. Like, comment, share, and subscribe as always. I don't know. I'm not going to give anything away just yet. Suffice to say, we will have an update video coming out soon, a sort of 2022 update videos to what you can expect on the channel. We had a sort of semi-formal meeting, almost now it was an informal meeting, discussing ideas of things that we wanted to bring to the channel, things that we think worked for our channel in 2021 that we're going to continue, and maybe some new things along the way as well. So for more information on that, and for when we do go live, we don't have an announcement for when we're going to do that update video, but it is going to be very soon. Follow us on our social medias. So that's Twitter @cinema_savvy. And then you can find us on Facebook and letterboxd.com/cinemasavvy as well. In terms of regular segments that are coming to the channel, so by the time this goes up, we will have talked about episode 3 of the Book of Boba Fett. So we're going to be around for basically another month covering Star Wars content in that respect. So you can expect a new Book of Boba spoiler discussion. That's every Wednesday at 10 p.m. GMT. I can't tell you if episode 3 was good because we're recording this on Tuesday. So well, I guess I'll find out tomorrow. But yeah, I think that's covered everything. So thank you to everyone that's followed us so far for the Peter Jackson retrospective. And for the Peter Jackson retrospective, if you are a Peter Jackson fan, stick around until December and we're going to go into The Hobbit, and that's going to be a doozy. So thank you very much to everyone that's followed us week to week. Until the next video, we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.